good to be here with you all this evening. Before we get started, I apologize. There were a couple of prayer needs that I failed to mention. Also, in your prayers, remember our brother Melvin Jones, who recently lost his brother. Also, his wife Debbie, who also like a day later lost her aunt. So remember the Jones families as you pray, and just anything else that I may have failed to mention. So if you would, whether it be a physical copy of the Bible or a digital copy of the Bible, whatever you have with you this evening, go ahead and open up to the book of Acts, specifically Acts chapter 5. Acts chapter 5, we're going to be looking at verses 1 through 11. The topic of discussion, as you can see on the back behind me, it's authenticity versus showmanship. Authenticity versus showmanship. I'm going to be reading from the New American Standard Version of the Bible. So Acts chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. But a man named Ananias, with his wife Sapphira, sold a piece of property and kept back some of the price for himself, with his wife's full knowledge. And bringing a portion of it, he laid it at the apostles' feet. But Peter said, Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back some of the price of the land? While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not under your control? Why is it that you have conceived this deed in your heart? You have not lied to men, but to God. And as he heard these words, Ananias fell down and breathed his last, and great fear came over all who heard of it. The young men got up and covered him up, and after carrying him out, they buried him. Now there elapsed an interval of about 3 hours, and his wife came in not knowing what had happened. And Peter responded to her, Tell me whether you sold the land for such and such a price. And she said, Yes, for such and such a price. Then Peter said to her, Why is it that you have agreed together to put the Spirit of the Lord to the test? Behold, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out as well. And immediately she fell down at his feet and breathed her last. And the young men came in and found her dead, and they carried her out and buried her beside her husband. And great fear came over the whole church and over all who heard of these things. We have this classic case of hypocrisy, of people doing something and conspiring to not just lie to men, but to lie to God. I think back, as far as illustration purposes are concerned, I think back to the time that when I worked at Target, and one of the things that I did at Target is I was not only a cashier at Target, but I was also a guest service team member. I was a guest service attendant, but I also worked in the cash office. And one of the things that I did in my time at Target in working in the cash office is exactly what you're thinking. I counted money, and I have counted hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So much so that I got to a point to where I didn't even necessarily have to handle the money to tell you as to whether or not a bill was real or counterfeit, because I got to a point to where I could just tell by looking at it. And one of the things concerning checking to see whether or not a bill is counterfeit or real, and you usually do this with, I know at Target we would do it with $20 and above. And you would hold it up to the light. And what happens is when you hold a bill up to the light is you're checking for a strip to see if that strip is present. But not only that, you're also looking for a reflection. And if that reflection is there, that strip is there, identifying that, say it's a $20 bill, that strip says this is a $20 bill. There's also the reflection of the president, or not president in the case of the $100 bill, because that's Ben Franklin. He was never president. If those reflectors, if all of those markers are there, that lets you know that that bill is authentic. Now, I saw myself a really good counterfeit bill that, for argument's sake, we're going to say that it was a 20, and I do that in quotation marks. What it really was a bleached out 5. And something was off about it, and so I had to check it. And sure enough, I hold it up. I was like, I don't remember Abraham Lincoln being on the $20 bill. Pretty sure it's not him. But anyway, we do those things. We hold bills up to the light to see if they're real, to see if they're counterfeit, to see if those the appropriate markers that are there. We're talking about Ananias and Sapphira. We're talking about authenticity versus showmanship. And what we've seen here in this text is we've seen these two individuals, Ananias and Sapphira, that have sold a piece of land. Now, the text tells us plainly that this land was theirs. Okay? It belonged to them. They could do whatever they wanted to with it. But the text also lets us know that they made the decision to sell said property. Okay? Now, that's all well and good. People buy and sell land all the time. People buy and sell houses all the time. People buy and sell things all the time. So what's the problem? Well, here's the problem. The problem that we see with Ananias and Sapphira is that they had at some point potentially made some sort of proclamation that they were going to give all of the proceeds of the land from the land that they sold and give it to the church. Simple enough, right? Well, one of the interesting things that I find in this story is that, it was theirs to give. It was a voluntary action. A voluntary action, meaning they didn't have to do it, but they didn't. They made a choice. So they do this. And one at a time, they make this proclamation that here's what we sold the land for. And one of the things that stands out to me about this story is that it's Peter, of all people, that calls them out and says, is that really what you sold it for? Or was it for another price? Yeah, it's really what we sold it for. The reason why I say that it stands out to me that it's Peter that's calling him out is, remember that Peter was the one that said, Lord, I will die for you. And Jesus says, you're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows twice. But yet, Peter has his moment of redemption. I say that to say this. What we have here is 2 individuals pretending to be something that they're not. And what they're pretending to be is honest. They're pretending to be, transparent, if you will. I've got 3 points that I want to share with you tonight concerning authenticity versus showmanship. Point number 1 is that authenticity requires just that, transparency. Authenticity requires transparency. When we are being real, not just with our friends, but with our families, with God, in anything in life, it requires transparency, because the truth will come out. People will see right through it. You can put up this wall, this facade that, this is me. I'm a big people person. And I love to go and ask people, how's your day going? I could go to Jamie right now and ask Jamie, how's your day going, Jamie? And I would suspect that with the relationship that Jamie and I have, that Jamie's going to tell me what his day is like, because that's the relationship that we have. Some of you that I might not know so well, And I'm not trying to call you fake or anything, but sometimes we have this tendency, this natural knee-jerk reaction that maybe our day's not fine. Maybe some of you adults, maybe with your work, some things are going south with your work. Maybe you even lost your job. I made mention in our prayer list we had some of our one of our elders and his wife recently both lost a family member each. You think life is all blue skies and rainbows with them right now? They're hurting. And that's the thing is like sometimes we tend to not be transparent whenever it never hurts to be transparent. Sometimes transparency is what is needed in order for us to be able to build that stronger relationship. We talk about family here at Cawson Street, where we are a Christ-centered church where everyone matters. Every person matters. And the mindset behind that is that we would be real with each other, that we would talk to each other. And I'm just using that as an example, but in our faith, in our walk with God, we need to be authentic with each other. And that also means being transparent with each other. If you're struggling, it's okay to say that you're struggling. I'm going to tell on myself for a moment. When I interviewed here, I was going through some tough times. And I told them that. I'm still here. They didn't care. Well, they do care. They did care. That's not what I meant. That's not what I meant at all. I didn't think that one through. They did care and they do care. What I meant to say is that I was real with my elders and with my preacher. I let them know, you know what? I'm not okay. And this is what's going on in my life. And I'm telling you that so that you know, and I'm talking to the youth groups right now. I'm telling you that so that you know that it's okay to not be okay. I promise you that whatever it is that you're dealing with right now, number one, you're not the only one in the world dealing with it. Number two, somebody that you know has probably already dealt with it. And number three, you are surrounded, not just in this room right now, but at your home congregations, with people that love you enough that want to be able to help you in whatever it is that you're dealing with. Authenticity requires transparency. All Ananias and Sapphira had to do was be transparent about the truth, but instead they chose to not be transparent. They chose to lie, and they got caught up in that lie. Point number 2 that I want to share with you tonight: authenticity eliminates showmanship. Authenticity eliminates showmanship. Simply put, when you're being real, you don't have to waste time being fake. You don't have to put time and energy into building up this wall, into pretending that you're okay when you're really not. By choosing to be real, by choosing to be open, by choosing to let people in, you're eliminating that showmanship. You are avoiding having to keep up with, well, what did I tell this person? Because I got to tell somebody else the same thing. It all goes back to it's okay to not be okay. The showmanship concerning Ananias and Sapphira, going back to our text, what they did is they put up this wall of, we are righteous people, we are good people and honest people, and this is what we sold our land for. Here it is, church, this is our donation. Peter saw right through it, because Peter had been there. Peter knew what it was like to build up a wall, because he thought he knew, yeah, I've got strength, but he really didn't. Jesus saw right through it. And he had to learn the lesson that, sometimes you think you're really strong, but you might not be as strong as you think you are. And so, he had to learn what it was like to be real. You know what? Maybe I won't always proclaim Jesus, because you know what? I didn't always proclaim Jesus. But now I do. And now I'm the one that preached that first gospel sermon on the day of Pentecost. And I'm the one that's going to help lead others to Jesus. The same Jesus that I walked with for years. The same Jesus that I saw perform miracles. The same Jesus that I saw walk on water. The same Jesus that called me out to walk on water. The same Jesus that died for me. And I don't have to pretend anymore. And neither do you. But they did. And he saw right through it. Did you really sell it for that much? Yeah. I'm not sure how they would have answered. I mean, it may have been that hesitant, yeah. It may have been that confident, yeah. This is absolutely what we sold it for. You might be dealing with a situation, young people. You might be dealing with something, a sin that is, quote, secret, that nobody else knows about, that you're struggling with. But just know that just because none of us know doesn't mean that he doesn't know. And being real with each other, being real with your youth minister, being real with your parents, as awkward as that can be at times, it's always, always, always going to be worth it, because you don't have to put up that front. You can be who you really are and know that you're still loved anyway, that you're still cared about anyway. It's a hard lesson for some of us to learn. For some of us, not so much. But that authenticity, it eliminates that showmanship that sometimes we try to put on. Third point I want to share with you tonight is that authenticity strengthens unity amongst believers. Authenticity strengthens unity amongst believers. The proof is in the pages. The proof is in the practice. When you're real with people, they're going to be real with you back. And what happens is, not only are you building a relationship with a person or a group of persons, but you're also building trust with a person or a group of persons. Okay? And what happens is you're strengthening that bond that you have with that person. It's built on something solid, on something real, because it's authentic. There's the kid song that we sing during VBS and Bible Hour that goes, the wise man built his house upon the rock, and then the foolish man builds his house on the sand. But when you think about that rock, a rock is a solid, firm foundation. Out there during the singing in the foyer, we sang the song, Firm Foundation. What you want to do in your walk, not just with God, but in your relationships, in your walk with each other, is to be authentic, to strengthen that unity that you have. Not just only with each other, but also with God, to have that good, solid, firm foundation. Because God already knows anyway. And we're God's people. We're God's representatives, and we're supposed to, if we can't be real with anybody else, we need to at least be real with each other. But we need to be real with everybody. One of the things that I really love and appreciate about this encounter that we have, this story of Ananias and Sapphira, is that it's an example of what was going on in the early church, and how the Lord was not going to allow the church to get off on a bad start. They were going to be negatively, they were misrepresenting what the church was supposed to stand for. Nope, not today. Both of them. Now, does that happen all the time? No. But I think one of the things that we can take from that is simply this. the truth always comes out. Always. It may be sooner, it may be later. But just because you think, I know something you don't know, God does. Because God knows everything that's going on. That strength, that the unity that we can have with each other, but also with God. Some things that we need to remember, all right? Very quickly. Got 3 things that we need to remember. First thing we need to remember is that being authentic is necessary. Being authentic is necessary. If you want to have a strong relationship with not just maybe your friends, but maybe your family, maybe your church family, maybe it might be your coworkers, whatever kind of relationship it is, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, authenticity is a necessity in that relationship. Okay? But bigger than that, in our Christian walk, being representatives of God, Christian meaning follower of Christ, being authentic is absolutely necessary, because the last thing that we need to be guilty of is being a fake Christian. The last thing that people need to associate us as Christians, the last word that needs to be attached to us is hypocrite. But there's a lot of them out there, unfortunately. Don't let that be you. Second thing to remember, being authentic may be necessary, but number 2, being authentic is difficult. Nobody ever said that being real was easy, because it can be at times, but it can also be difficult at times. I told you that I was telling on myself. So let me tell you the rest of that story. One of the most uncomfortable things that I've had to do in ministry is tell a potential congregation that I'm interested in going to that I was asked to resign from the last place, but not because I did anything wrong, but because they wanted to go in another direction, because they were restructuring the ministries. So there's more to it than that. I was also going through some mental health issues as well, but all of those things were uncomfortable parts of a conversation that had to be had. It was being real. It was being vulnerable. When you're being real with each other, when you're being real with your parents, when you're being real with your friends, when you're being real with your youth minister, when you're being real with God, it can be hard. It can be difficult. It can be gut-wrenching. I'm pouring my heart out to 6 elders and a preacher. This is what's going on in my life. And in the back of my mind, all I can think about is, yeah, I'm not getting that job. Here I am. They hired me anyway. Why? Because I was real. Being real is hard, but it's helpful. When you're real and you show who you truly are, there's that transparency that we talked about. But there's also that building of trust. Hey, this is somebody that's seen and done and had some struggles, but they didn't give up. And they're gonna be an asset and not a liability. Third thing to remember is that being authentic changes lives. Being authentic changes lives. You may be wondering, well, wait a minute. Okay, I can get behind the being authentic is necessary, and I can even get behind being authentic is difficult. How is being authentic life-changing? Being authentic is life-changing, not necessarily to just your life, but to somebody else's life. By being real, by showing somebody that may be struggling, this is me. This is hard for me to talk about, but this is who I am. This is what I've dealt with. By opening up and being honest, by being authentic, you can change somebody else's life. Because guess what? You don't always know what somebody else is going through. One of the things that I tell my students, I haven't told them here just yet because haven't been around them enough, but it's going to happen. Matter of fact, if you're here right now and you're a Cawson Street youth, this is the first time you've heard this, but it's not going to be the last time you've heard this. One of the things that you always need to remember is that you're always being listened to. You're always being watched. Whether you like it or not, whether you realize it or not. There's always somebody listening. There's always somebody watching. And no, I'm not necessarily talking about God right now. You're always making an impact in somebody's life, directly and indirectly. And so when you keep that in mind, you never know, by being real, whose life you might be changing. When you stop and reflect on the events of life in general, maybe you talked to somebody and you had to you it was a simple conversation. I went to this person and I just said hi. And I asked them how their day was, and their day wasn't going really well, but I listened to what they had to say and I prayed with them. And to you, that might be just something really small. But what if that person was at the end of their rope? What if that person was at the point that I can't take it anymore? Nobody cares. What if they were on the verge of giving up altogether? But you listen to them. You don't know. You don't know. But the point that I want us to get at is that, when we're authentic in our faith, when we're authentic in our lives in general, it changes everything. Because we don't have to worry about this showmanship, this putting on this facade. Because guess what happens with showmanship? We saw it with Ananias and Sapphira. It might not necessarily happen right away. But by not being real, by putting on a show, by being fake, it's going to cost you your life. Is that really a chance you want to take? Not this guy. Not a chance. I know that some of you have your own youth ministers, some of you have youth workers, volunteers, whatever it is that you have. But I promise you, you've got somebody to talk to. You got somebody that cares about you, somebody that loves you. Somebody that wants to be there to listen to you. But not only that, you could also be that person that somebody needs. That person that somebody needs to talk to. And by being real, maybe they will talk to you. But you won't know until you start. So maybe you're here tonight and you've been living a life of showmanship. Well, there's breath in your body still because you're here. And you can change that. You can turn it around and you can start living a life of authenticity tonight. Maybe you are living a life of authenticity, but it's really difficult. And you're just like, you know what? If I just tell people I'm okay, but I'm really not, what's that going to hurt? Don't do that. As difficult as it may be to continue being real, to continue being authentic, don't stop. Keep going. It's absolutely worth it. Because there might be somebody that sees right through it, whether they're in this room or at your home congregation or somebody that you know in general. But there's also somebody else that sees right through it. So don't chance it. Don't risk it. If you have a need, whatever that need may be, you can either come to me or one of your youth minister or someone else in leadership, whatever that might be. We ask that you bring it to the Lord. Don't delay while together we stand and sing to encourage you.